Hey, it's Mailbag Wednesday. What can we expect, or maybe what should we expect from Michael Kopech this season? How will success or failure from the World Baseball Classic affect White Sox players moving forward? Also, in Cactus League play, the Sox beat the Oakland Athletics on Tuesday afternoon as Dylan Cease returned to the mound, and more info on how Pedro Grifol has been running his first camp in Glendale, Arizona.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Hey, welcome back to Locked On White Sox. Just about 2 weeks away from opening day, March 30th. White Sox in Houston for that 4-game series to kick things off. Appreciate you continuing to pass this podcast along to other White Sox fans in your life. Appreciate all the questions and comments. For our mailbag, you can always do that at lockedonsox@gmail.com. Spring training record for our Chicago White Sox. They are 8-6. Sox beat the Oakland Athletics on Tuesday afternoon. We'll get to that in just a little bit. First Mailbag Wednesday. Got some interesting comments always it's always a changing terrain, so to speak. How players have been staying healthy and what we've been seeing in spring training and a little bit of World Baseball Classic stuff mixed in there. I'm feeling like fans are starting to shift a little bit with how they were feeling in maybe December and January. But first things first, Michael Kopech. And a lot of people have asked about this and talked about Michael Kopech. And I saw someone in the YouTube comments specifically just ask, what can we expect from Michael Kopech? Who knows? I think he's wondering himself what he's got in the tank. Finally, it looks like we're going to get a healthy Michael Kopech. Starting his second year in the starting rotation. At least I hope that knee is ready to go. It sure looked good when he had that first outing, that perfect outing against the Los Angeles Angels this past Sunday. Looked really good, looked strong in that outing. First 2 innings, took only 23 pitches for Kopech in that debut. Finished his workload in the bullpen, which is pretty common with pitchers. And if you have a chance to get out there and watch their bullpen sessions after they are done with their 1, 2, sometimes 3 innings, I really enjoy it. You get a very up close and personal view out there in right field at Camelback Ranch. Right-hander is scheduled to start the team's home opener against the Giants on April 3rd, and he thought about getting up for a third time on Sunday. That was beneficial to the process after building up 2 up and downs in live BPs. This is what Kopech said about that Sunday outing. Not that I was completely gassed, but I could tell you I was a little tired, started pulling off some stuff, started losing my body a little bit, had to find adjustments. It was good to go back out and have to work on that stuff and grind through that a little bit. A grind might be a little bit of a stretch, but kind of get back to myself. I started pulling off some stuff, and then I found it again. The slider felt really good. Sharp out of my hand and had the break I wanted it to. Kopech said, I'm happy with where I'm at with secondary stuff too. Again, it was a solid performance against maybe a B or C club with the Los Angeles Angels, but still, there had to have been a lot of aggression and just excitement and a lot of nerves coming for Kopech in this first start of spring, and I thought he handled it really well. I think he is the absolute X factor in this starting rotation. He has talked about in certain articles over the offseason wanting to become a pitcher, not a thrower. He's not going to be someone that's going to fall out of bed throwing 100 miles per hour, as he has said, and getting more to the craft of pitching, being more efficient with his pitches. He, I think, has got a goal of 30 plus starts and 200 innings. Boy, that would be a game changer for the White Sox if we could get something like that from Kopech. It would take a ton of pressure off of Lance Lynn and Dylan Cease. I expect big things from Michael Kopech. I don't know about the 200 innings, but if we could see north of 150, somewhere around the maybe 175, 180, and definitely 30 plus starts, I think that would be a huge win for the White Sox and for that starting staff. And of course, the bullpen. How starting pitchers do and how they perform also has that trickle down effect to our bullpen. And I think early on in the season, when we're not going to have Garrett Crochet for the first couple months, and of course, Liam Hendriks battling something bigger than baseball right now, we don't know what that bullpen's going to look like. And I think it would be nice if our starters could go a little longer in games. It's normally not, what you want perhaps in April and May, colder weather early in the season. But if these guys can do it and they're pitching efficiently, then that would be a big plus for our bullpen. From Tyler, thank you so much, Tyler, for the comment. This is what Tyler had to say. So far, the performances of White Sox players in the World Baseball Classic, plus how Giolito and Kopech are looking healthier, makes me feel a lot better about the season. And just to build on the previous mailbag from last week, as spring training evolves, I'm hearing from more and more people that they are pleasantly surprised at how things are going and surprised at how their attitudes have changed as fans. For me, look, it's still just spring, and I know the past, as I'm sure you do, all too well. But if I keep getting weighed down, by the threat of injuries and players, having disappointing performances, especially early on in the season, then I don't have the capability, to embrace possible change, which is what I want. I like what I've been seeing. I like what, has been happening out in Glendale. I like what the players are saying, how they're responding to Grifol's camp, and it's just the overall atmosphere of spring training. So far, so good. Again, so great to have Herb Lawrence on the previous episode. That was a real treat for me, bringing back an original Locked On White Sox host. And it's tough to get into meaty discussions with time constraints in an episode. But I wanted to respond, and elaborate on something that Herb said about wondering where White Sox players' mentality is necessarily at. Like, it seems like they're starting to buy into what Pedro Grifol and the coaching staff laid out in the offseason. That was a big question mark of mine. Like, will some of these players really buy into a whole new way of doing things? And it seems like they want that. And have contributed and have communicated what they have wanted, and Grifol's listening. Now, what about, that chip on their shoulder, that mentality after the Sox fell flat last season, and that's an understatement, really, and the Guardians rubbing it in after they won the division, long off season to reflect for those that were involved in last year's mess. Could Pedro Grifol rally the troops, and would bulletin board material work? Would it be necessary, or would players find their own motivation, a self-motivation Would they take it personal and buy into the new culture, the new leadership, and work to build chemistry while also believing in what kind of team they truly have? Because it is a really good team. They should win the AL Central. They should win it easily. They definitely have the best starting staff. And boy, top to bottom in that lineup, if everybody stays healthy. But, getting into that mental side of it, that was a good question. That I liked where Herb was going with that, and that's another thing. And right now, as far as we can read, as far as we can tell, everybody is not only healthy, but I think they're in the right mindset. So interested to see how that shapes up over these next 2 weeks. Dylan Cease had an extremely rough outing last week against the Kansas City Royals. He was back on the mound Tuesday afternoon and probably liked his performance against Oakland a whole lot better. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season has come and gone, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. White Sox in action against the Oakland Athletics Tuesday afternoon. Dylan Cease, there was an article in The Athletic on Dylan Cease. It's a great read if you have the opportunity to do that, by James Fegan. And he was commenting, on that start against the Royals. It was rough. He didn't seem too worried, but he went into a little bit of detail on what was happening and maybe what the focus is moving forward, because he was back on the mound against the Oakland A's on Tuesday. So this is what he said after giving up 11 runs to the Royals last week. I'm not saying it's what spring is for, but spring is for calibrating and kind of getting everything going. Fegan wrote, but a complete hand wave of a night 3 weeks away from the start of the season, where last year's Cy Young finalist was clearly out of sync, wild, and not fully built up, is not fully satisfying either. No, it's go time, said pitching coach Ethan Katz, whose words carry a lot of weight with Dylan Cease. Once we're here, whether they start a little bit slower with how much intensity they're putting into it, we've still got to execute. Whether it's 80% of the bullpen or 90%, we've got to be able to execute the things and be able to do the things we want to take into the game. Fegan wrote, Cease remains healthy and confident that his velocity will continue to climb from the 95 miles per hour he topped out last Wednesday against the Royals, but he did not enjoy what he experienced and is not interested in going through it again. That reaffirmed it. It's time to get going, Cease said. I'm going full intensity for the rest of spring with everything I'm doing pitching-wise. I would definitely say it's complete mode and no longer practice mode. After the Royals debacle, according to Fegan, White Sox manager Pedro Grifol noticed that Cease was victimized by aggressive swings early in the count, though we view that as a trend that extends beyond Cease. Either they get themselves out early or they wait and I get 2 strikes and then put them in a bad spot and I get the strikeout, Cease said. I think the 2 strategies will be to wait me out and try to get me out by the 5th inning and hopefully I beat myself, or try to get me early and jump on a heater. As long as my stuff's good and I'm getting in the zone, I think either one mostly plays to my benefit. I'll bet you, too, that the games where I'm not in the zone early, they probably changed their plan a bit to, all right, let's wait this guy out. I thought that was a very important part of that. And I love that Grifol brought that to Cease's attention, as I'm sure Katz probably saw it. And Cease has got to realize it as well. Look, they don't want to be on 2 strikes with me because I've got some nasty stuff. So more times than not, I think this year, especially after what all the success that Cease had last year, the book is out on Dylan Cease. I think you're going to see players attack him pretty early in games. They're going to jump on a pitch. It might not be their favorite pitch, but they're going to jump on something early in an at bat because they don't want to go deep into a count. They don't want to be dealing with 2 strikes with Dylan Cease. So I thought that was an interesting part to that article. It's a great read. So Cease's line on Tuesday afternoon against the Oakland A's, he went 3 1/3 innings, only gave up 3 hits, 2 runs. Only one of them was earned. Gave up a couple walks and had 4 strikeouts. Gave up both runs in the first inning. I was listening to the game on the MLB app. It was the Oakland Athletics broadcasters. Cease, he seemed kind of shaky in the first, allowed a lot of action on the base paths by the Athletics, but obviously did not let it snowball like in his previous outing. I think Cease will be pleased. And again, he left the game healthy, which is such a big point here at this point in spring training. Sox also used Shaw, Diekman, Kelly, Lopez, Ramsey, and Morin in the game. Sox offense, Billy Hamilton with a walk-off bunt. Did I read that on social media right? Sox scored 5 runs, 9 hits, 6 extra base hits. They had 5 doubles and a home run by Hanser Alberto. Sox were 2 for 9 with runners in scoring position, and Billy Hamilton had his 3rd stolen base of the spring. He is going to be a tough guy to keep down. He really is. The speed, the different things that he can do, laying a bunt down late in the game, if that's the way Pedro Grifol wants to play it, and he can be a defensive replacement late in the game. Billy Hamilton's your guy. We know what he can bring culture and chemistry-wise. Keep your eyes on Billy Hamilton here these next few weeks. Victor Reyes and Eric Gonzalez each had 2 hits in the game. Grandal with a throwing error early on. So there were some roster cuts a few days ago, March 12th. This is what the White Sox had to say. Sox sent 9 out of MLB camp. Chicago trimmed its roster by 9 with the following moves: optioned catcher Carlos Perez and infielder Lenin Sosa to AAA Charlotte, optioned infielders Brian Ramos and Jose Rodriguez to AA Birmingham, reassigned outfielder Yolki Cespedes, right-hander Edgar Navarro, and left-handers Nate Fisher, Andrew Perez, and Sammy Peralta to minor league camp. The moves left the White Sox with 50 players in camp, 26 pitchers, 4 catchers, 12 infielders, and 8 outfielders. Ramos, Rodriguez, Sosa, Cespedes, and Perez are ranked among the team's top 30 prospects per MLB pipeline. Only injury update so far involves Garrett Crochet and his Tommy John recovery, expected to return in mid-May. Lance Lynn and Tim Anderson had great performances against Team Canada on Monday night. How will the World Baseball Classic experiences shape the 2023 season? More on that in a moment. That was a fun game to watch if you did. Team USA taking care of business against Team Canada Monday night, beat them 12-1 fairly easily. Eloy Jimenez and Yoan Moncada getting some successes as well with their respective teams. Lynn was on the hill for Team USA. I liked what I saw. Lynn went 5 innings, gave up 2 hits, 1 earned run that was a home run, and he had 6 strikeouts. So far in Cactus League play, Lance Lynn has had 3 starts, 10 innings, 12 strikeouts in those 10 innings, and he's got a 4.5 ERA. Now, last 12 starts of the 2022 season were pretty good for Lance Lynn. He went 7-3, had a 2.43 ERA, 74 innings, had 75 strikeouts in those 74 innings, and only walked 9 batters. So some good stuff when you think about those sample sizes. Late last season, this experience with the World Baseball Classic and what you've seen from Lance Lynn so far in Cactus League play, I've liked it. I've liked it a lot. And how about Tim Anderson in Monday night's game against Team Canada? He went 2 for 3, had a triple, RBI, 2 runs scored, and a stolen base. There was a very big write-up in The Athletic recently on Tim Anderson. Nothing but positive things to say about what TA brings to Team USA, not just with his bat and glove, but also his energy, positive vibes. Manager DeRosa, he had some great quotes. He wants the bat flip. I'm sure you've seen that quote. He wants everything that TA brings. And, Anderson went to second base. He played second base first time in his career on Monday. And DeRosa had some options. He could have used somebody else at second base, but he wanted Anderson's bat, wanted his energy in the lineup. So the more national attention Tim Anderson gets, the better for him when it comes to contract talks. But of course, he's got to perform. However, if this success with Team USA continues and he enters this season healthy, TA could be on a mission, which is great for the White Sox, but might push Anderson out of Jerry's spending market. What will the White Sox do? We've talked about it on this podcast. Merkin has, had articles about it on whitesox.com. Anderson would like an answer now. I know that the team's got some options, but boy, I'd love to get a big contract extension done now. I want to be here. I want to end my career in a White Sox uniform. I want that security. But we know how the White Sox spend money. It's something to absolutely watch. But hey, for now, exciting to see what he's been doing with Team USA. And I just hope it continues into the season in Houston and beyond in this 2023 year. Great article. I love this one. Again, if I'm not watching or listening to the White Sox, I am reading articles about this team. And there was another good one in The Athletic about the coaching staff, Pedro Grifol and his staff, and what they do with downtime and how they manage it during spring training. Now, Pedro Grifol is not a fan of pitchers standing in the outfield shagging fly balls. This is something that is almost done at every single level. I played baseball all 4 years in high school, and even at high school level, that's where it starts. Pitchers are out there shagging fly balls because pitchers aren't hitting. You're not going to be in the lineup hitting. So you're out there shagging fly balls. It's just absolute downtime. There's nothing productive is happening. And you know what? We've heard stories of pitchers hurting themselves trying to shag fly balls. So Grifol is not a fan. And this is what he had to say. When in their game do they stand on the field somewhere for an hour? Grifol said of requiring pitchers to shag. I don't like wasting time. Mistakes come in dead periods. I like moving. That's why I love the pitch clock. I love rotations out there. That's why nobody stands around. I like the pitchers coming in, doing their PFPs and coming out. I don't like pitchers shagging. I don't like wasting time. There has to be something else to do. As what Fegan wrote, Grifol frequently references third base coach Eddie Rodriguez as the orchestrator of spring training, allowing him more hands-on moments in practice and more time for one-on-one conversations with players. Rodriguez traveled to Camelback Ranch ahead of time to tour the facility and figure out how to tailor his program to the environment alongside Grifol, hitting coach Jose Castro, and field coordinator Mike Tosar. Quality over quantity. I think that is just a simple quote. That was from Elvis Andrus when he summed up how things have been running at Camelback Ranch. Quality over quantity. Rodriguez stipulates that player feedback is essential since running players through drills they find unnecessary is counter to the plan, even if maintenance work is essential. I thought that was a simple paragraph, simple, real just sentence, but it has a lot of a weight to it. There's no sense in running players through unnecessary drills. And that is where that whole communication comes into play that we heard about Grifol, discuss early in the offseason. I'm going to talk to players. How do they want things to be run? And I'm going to take that input, discuss it with our coaching staff when we design these drills and how we're going to move players through, a day in, day out process at camp, player directed, manager facilitated. That's all I can think of when I hear about, these articles around how Pedro Grifol runs things. He gets input from players. They have important things to say, and Grifol leads those discussions, and then he's going to facilitate these different stations and how he's going to run camp based on the input from his players. I absolutely love it. Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcast. We're on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and get your questions in for next week's mailbag, lockedonsox@gmail.com. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Now, for your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the very best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the next episode, I'll continue to bring you the latest happenings from Glendale, Arizona, as our Chicago White Sox inch closer to opening day. Really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.